Welcome to Design with Renn, the podcast for designers, researchers, and makers who want to build more inclusive, human-centered systems. I'm Renn Scott, and today I'm chatting with Kem Laurin-Lubin, a brilliant design thinker and activist with a fresh perspective shaped by feminism and post-colonial critique. We explore what design has lost when it shifted from human-centered to consumer-driven, and why AI, femtech, and surveillance demand new conversations about power, privacy, and consent. If you want to design with care, empathy, and equity, this episode is for you. Let's dive in. Thank you, Kem, for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Renn.
Yeah, amazing. You are the official first guest on my Design with Renn podcast. So thanks so much for agreeing to join me, and so nice to see your lovely face as always. Hey, let's get right back. Well, first, do you want to give yourself a bit of an intro here? Who are you? I know, of course, who you are, but how do you describe yourself these days? I've known you for so long, but so I don't want to simplify it or not capture it in the way that you want to refer to yourself now.
Yeah, I'm a multi-hyphenated creative, doing scholarly stuff, trying to be an activist, channeling my inner activist. Yeah, so on a serious note, so I have been in the design space for almost 25 years. It gives my age away, but that's what it is. And, I went back after being a practitioner for I think 17 years, decided I wanted to go back and finish something that I started back then, and that was a PhD. And this is what brings us to this call. And it is in the general space. I tell people that I went in this PhD as a designer, and I emerged a feminist, a post-colonial scholar, and a whole bunch of things that are just hyphenated at this point. And hopefully, as we get through this call, we'll settle upon what I am, who I am. But yes, let's do
Amazing.
this.
Yeah, so amazing. So going back to something you started, so I'm so curious. Tell us a bit more about that. You mentioned going back to something that I started. So from the time that you spent as a designer, so can you share more?
Yeah. So Renn and I, well, for the listeners, we've known each other a very long time. We've had parallel careers, and so we've intersected many times. We've worked at the same company, fun. And when I started that journey in, and I won't mention company names. I think it's respectful to leave that out of this space. But when I started in industry, I led many design teams, and one of the things that was very persistent then was the whole idea of research, ethnography. And we talked about this in the past, the whole idea of things like human factors design, which really helped inform the researches that we did, the research that we did, and things like the patents. And I know, Ren, you have tons of patents, but all of these things didn't just emerge out of thin air. There was research, there was interaction with real people to understand the context and how we design. And my general interest, because I had just graduated from the University of Waterloo studying the whole space of what was then called hyperactivity. And that is simply the granddaddy of what is now the web and how we navigate digital spaces. And my own thesis was looking at the screen-based controls that we would need to navigate in these graphical user interfaces. But my general interest, having a passion for rhetoric, was trying to understand the whole space of human agency in that space. And you and I well know when we started back in the day, there was something called human-computer interaction, human-centered design, right? And all of that stuff has just gone by the wayside, and we call people users now, right? The next wave is that we're calling people customers. And so what I talk about in my book really didn't just start in 2019 when I went back to school. It started really on that journey of making sure that the human was always centered in the process of systems design, because we're building these things for humans, but yet still we have been human beings have been centered as part of the process, and this is getting worse and worse. So fast forward 2025, I'm just a few weeks away from donning the cap of a doctor of philosophy. And one of the things that has taken me to this point is also having that experience in industry to know that something shifted dramatically. And I want to say around 2009, where the work that you and I do had just began this phase of becoming a commodity, right? Everybody was doing it. It was becoming this cheapening, I don't want to say department, but cheapening element of the whole software development cycle. You can attest to this. I know that you and I, in the space of user-centered design, we spent a lot of time evangelizing. Hey, please center the human. And so, yeah. So this is really the culmination of all of that work into the current moment that we're here for as well, too.
Yeah, you've touched on so many things within just that reflection. And
Mm,
key to me, which comes across in many conversations that I've been having, and sort of reminders for people to think about, first, hopefully people think about, we're designing product, service, apps, experiences for
yeah.
people. And that's a common thing that I find I need to, and that I do reiterate, thinking first of those people that we're designing for, who are they, what do they want? And yeah, we can call them
Yeah.
users, but certainly thinking of them in a human way is very critical. And so you mentioned your thesis and new book just launched. It's very exciting.
Yeah.
Congratulations! It's such you are such an inspiration for me. So
Thank
just those
you.
that don't know the name of the book yet, so please add and tell me more of the different names that you have for it as well. Which I'll just kick it off. Design Heuristics for Emerging Technologies. This is all about AI design and human-centered futures.
Mhm.
Super interesting to me, and I know to everyone, is that you're explicitly exploring the privacy and women's health, algorithm
Mm,
surveillance, and
yeah.
on this too, sort of rhetoric and ideological framing of AI. So yeah, tell us more. Like, what led you to write this book now? Why now?
Yeah.
Why is this from your point of view?
Why now? Why not now? These are such critical times, and I don't know if you can feel it, but something has drastically changed in society, and it is very difficult to talk about this book without talking about my thesis itself. So. When I started in 2019, a friend of mine in Germany who has been around an OG, what I call an OG UX person, reached out to me and said, "Oh, you're doing your PhD, I hear, at Waterloo." And I was wondering, what are your thoughts on artificial intelligence being used in UX? And I thought, I have no thoughts, but I could do some literature review
Hmm.
and do some presentation at HCII. So it was HCII, I think in 2021. That was the sort of the time. And I thought, well, let me just do some lit review to see what I can gather on the topic. And all I was coming back with was the Jacob Nielsen heuristics of and Moloch and all of that. And I thought, we can do better than that. I think these have served their purpose. And you're a designer, you know these 10 heuristics. But when are we going to start looking at this and thinking about the context of society having changed? We had a disruptor AI. And so I wrote a short article for the journal that was entitled, I think it was something along the lines of AI HCI Futures or Conversations with Designers, something like that. And this conversation actually was one of the first published works looking at how do we actually revisit heuristics as guiding principles of design when we say do no harm in the context of AI. What might that look like? So I presented this to my supervisor and we thought, okay, this will be foundational to a good integrated thesis, which means simply that some people go on to do a PhD, but they might write a long essay. I decided that I wanted to be published in journals and get a collection of these essays and present them as part of my integrated thesis. So that's where all of this started. Back I think as early as 2020, which is around the time a PhD student 1 year in is beginning to think about what they want to do. And so put that aside, I started thinking a lot about what was happening in the space. At that time, there was a young ethicist who worked at Google who got fired because she was raising concerns about the large language models that Google was using. Her
I
name,
remember
incident,
this
was
one. Yep.
Timnit Gebru. She got fired alongside some other folks. And the whole firing had to do, well, don't question the AI. The AI knows better. So that really triggered me in so many ways. And I started thinking about, at the same time, I had the privilege of also introducing another scholar, Safia Noble, the author of Algorithms of Oppression.
Hmm.
And one of the things that she brought to my mind, she said to me, Kem, when I was doing my PhD, it was one of the most traumatic times for me as a Black woman because I was doing, researching that space of AI and search engines. And in Google, when I would say, why are Black women so, it would fill in all of these horrible words, ugly, promiscuous, and things like that. And I said, I cannot imagine what that's like. But I was also not a scholar of that mold. I was a designer. I was just going to get a degree to see, how we can improve heuristics in AI. And so I started thinking about this in the broader context of the humans that we had let go when they became users and then customers. And so I co-wrote this paper called Sex After Technology, which got published in Taylor and Francis. And this really looked at the whole space of what was happening in the US at the time with the reversal of Roe v. Wade, which was already established law. When they reversed that, what we had was the presentation of a space where we're living in the Handmaid's Tale, right? And
Hmm.
so a lot of this was being facilitated by technology, the fertility apps that monitor us, the period apps that we so casually sign on to. Like, who was actually overseeing the systems that was using human data and then representing these people and prosecuting these people? I think you and I talked about this a couple of days ago. This one woman who had somebody knock on her door, law enforcement knock on her door, because they thought that she should have been having a baby because she was one of these fertility women's app that suggests that she should be having a baby around this time. And the context was all off. She was going through menopause, right? You miss periods when you're going through that process. So I think all of these conversations that I try to have in the book is one that also embraces designers because we need the heuristics. We need the categorical heuristics like the user consent, affordances and all of these things. But in my mind, we also need the histories. We need the deep archaeologies that really help us unpack why are things animated that way in the GUI, right? We also need to understand the ideology. Who's doing this and who's left out for who? So we're
Hmm.
beginning to discover that a lot of these apps are owned by and financed by folks like Peter Thiel, right? So I'm not going to go too much into that, but to say that the way I started looking at my movement from being just a designer, design researcher, to one that was more a feminist designer, and you're in femtech, so you understand all of this, is that
Hmm.
we really had to understand what were the histories that were informing the moment and why all these things were happening. So the book is really responsive to the moment, right? And that is why I want to take it. There are aspects as well too with my thesis, but the book specifically is written for everyone, but also considering the rights of women, which is the third subtitle to the book.
Hmm. So
Yeah.
interesting. As you're talking through this, it's really making me think of, where I think of many things in a very different way.
That's good.
So it and the examples that you're providing are so rich from the point of view of things that are going on, historically in, society,
Yeah.
and but also from that technology point of view or product UI user experience point of view,
Yes.
what has existed in the past as to how we've created systems and now enabled or influenced. You tell me what's the right language here by and with AI, but the idea of, how we're exploring AI, women's health, privacy, where we've come from, and the examples that you've given are very recent from a few years have passed, but not
Yeah.
very many with what I describe as that's quite shocking to learn that
Yes.
a system that's created by people, peers, others like ourselves is so, shall I say, versed.
Oppressive. Hand
Oh,
was
yeah,
passing
limited.
oppressive.
Yeah, oppressive, but that I've really feel as I'm hearing what you're saying that as someone that is a designer, has led and continue to lead teams, that the awareness of this as how the systems are created, that of course designers, technologists, you fill in the blanks
Hmm.
as to who you think is responsible for one, but that the awareness of AI as a tool, an enabler, of course, is what we want to share, but the understanding of, what it currently, the systems that we created, what they currently are, and then the role and responsibility we have to change how they're,
Yeah.
but actively make sure that people have an awareness of the tool or how to do that, because I always think technology shouldn't be limited by those that don't have the education in order to interact with it, for one, but also as a designer and a practitioner, I really need to make sure that I understand how to make it better or provide the
Hmm.
tools for others that have more technology enablement knowledge than I do to, take the responsibility and create things that others can access in order to do that. So I'm talking a bit in
Yeah.
circles because I'm really talking out
It's
loud.
not circles at all.
But
It's very bang on.
yeah, so I just think it's like you've given these examples, but from how you've within your book, you tell us more of these sort of like what I'd say like ethical failures that you
Oh
see
God.
we're repeating in this space because the examples that you've given are some years have passed, but I'm not seeing
Yes.
systems that have what would be changing those use cases or examples to be any different, or are they different now based on some of this awareness that you're providing?
Let me unpack that by way of the deep history of the commoditization of women's bodies. And I know you and I have had some conversation around that in terms of, I mean, you are a femtech design. A lot of the work that you do is informed by and the sensitivities and empathies around understanding the women's context in that space. And I think the conversation we had was, why did you have to do that? It's because what was being done, general design, and I think the example we had a couple of years ago were the astronaut suits, right? We
Mhm.
had were at the Toronto Festival or something. And so the fact that you had to actually carve out a space for yourself in that general space tells us that that space was not optimized for women. So that's one example. The book, I'm not going to give the book away, but it gives a deep history of some of the commoditization of women along the way when we existed in analog worlds. A lot of the reviews that I do of other scholars, they come from all walks of life. And that was also very important for me to hear the
Mhm.
voices of not just women in North America, but women in the East, women in Europe, to see what their positions were on that. So that is one good thing with the theoretical component of the book. So fast forward, I don't want to use the women's movement as sort of the central point. I think sometimes we need to tell stories that are progressive so people don't think we're always going back to history to dig up all of the things. And so this happened and then this.
Mhm.
With the reversal of Roe v. Wade, we in Canada may think, oh, well, this is Canada. This stuff will never happen. But when we think of the deep histories of how people's healthcare data were contained, they were contained in a doctor's drawer that was locked, right? To follow the whole idea of the Hippocratic Oath, the whole idea that what happens between me and my doctor stays between me and my doctor. This is private information. When we migrated to the digital world, the gods of data brokerage decided every piece of data that came from us, our biometric data, was suddenly their property, and they needed a way to monetize that. So recently we saw as well to the massive upspringing of many like fertility apps. They started with very, what's the word, modest, innocent apps like track your heart rate,
Mhm.
track your sleep.
Mhm.
Now the apps tracking the color of women's whatever, when they miss their period, all of the details that really should be between you and your doctor. And so what is happening in that space at the intersection of, in the US specifically, the reversal of Roe v. Wade, the crystal fascist movement, the alt-right and all of that, there's been this ideal that we can go back to a time back in the 1950s when every woman lived in the Handmaid's Tale. And so the one example that I will use that sent chills down my back was this young woman, and this actually was, I think, cited in Cathy O'Neill's book, Weapons of Mass Destruction,
Mm.
that talked about the whole idea of this woman buying things online. And I think it was more Walmart, but don't quote me on that, alleged Walmart, but a place like Walmart that kept data on that person purchasing things over and over, only to reveal to that person, would you like to buy Pampers with that? And the person is like, what the hell?
Mhm.
So what you have systems that are embedded and overlaying existing systems where it's like whether it is a customer's grocery history and saying, we've seen a trend here that this person is now buying things that maybe that person might be pregnant, and also broadcasting that to that person's family. Would you like to get so and so a present? This is the invasion that we have right now in our personal, private space, that we have AI thinking it's so clever, representing us to the world. So that
Mhm.
is one example. The other frightening example was the case with Facebook in Kentucky. And I say again, yes, we're in Canada, but we also have lots of chat about privatization of healthcare here. And we need to be very, very wary as to what that will lead us to. So back to the example in Kentucky where this young lady was in a chat with her mother saying, Mom, I'm pregnant. What should I do? You should have an abortion. Guess who's watching this conversation? Your best friend AI, right? Embedded in the AI systems. Knock, knock, knock. There's a law enforcement a knock on her door. Her mother and herself, they're arrested, right, for having a conversation about abortion that are deemed illegal in places where Roe v. Wade has actually taken effect, right? I.e., red states. So you have all of these things happening in what seem like little pebbles, but we will begin to see an onslaught of cases like that. And the example I was using earlier, this woman who does things online, and we have to be cognizant of the fact that everything we do online is tracked. Everything we do online, there's somebody collecting data, thinking, how can I make money out of this piece of data? So for women, it is even more dangerous. And so when I think about the book, and how does the book begin to combat things like that? The whole idea of your personal information should not be used against you to the point where you're singled out as an individual in this vast space of data, right? And was there consent for any of this? But not only that, I, as a female user of an app, now I want to be able to say, I want my data anonymized. I don't want my data singled out so they could say, hey, Kem did this, but maybe something like women like Kem do this, right? And so these are some of the things I talk about when I talk about categorical heuristics is things like being anonymized in data pools. You'll very well remember when we worked at X company, we could keep people's NDAs for what, 3 to 5 years, and we throw it away. That was the law. This is no longer the space that we live in. It's a wild, wild west. And so we need to think about how, from a design perspective, from stakeholder perspective, from policymaker perspective, right? How do we actually have oversight of these engines that have just sprung up overnight in the last couple of years, now powered by AI? So this book really takes aim at interrogating these systems and creating an audit path so that when you look at whether it is a fertility app Glow, right, or Clue, or whatever funny names they have, that it could be deemed a safe space for women to operate based on what we know right now. Yeah, and that's just one example. There are so many examples in the book. And the other, example I think about, which is not necessarily in the space of women per se, but humans, is the United Healthcare example in the U.S., right?
Can I pause you? Can I pause you just for 1 minute before we go to the next example? So I didn't want to interrupt. Just was pausing for a moment just to frame a question. Questions that I use. On the topic of women and their data and anonymizing that. So as you were providing the example, so I'm thinking of that people are so, I think myself, or you tell me if you're yourself, people like we will give up our privacy and information, where we are, what we're doing. As an example, traveling on a daily basis, I want to get from point A to point B. So I will use enter my location, travel, so I can get there faster. And, based on where I am and what I'm doing, of course, that's tracked, but I'm sharing that because there's value to me to know, my route, the fastest way, and the hazards and so on. So though, depending on the app that I'm using, that may be anonymized, really it's not, because it is, tracking over time. And for me, it's value because I can easily say, where did I go? What time? Get to a given location that I might not remember the address to easily because it's in my history, etc. But that's for a very specific scenario, moving through space and getting to where I want to go to pick up, or whatever the case might be. I don't need to get into more examples there. While thinking of if I am using, which many women use different apps. Specifically, you talked about a pregnancy or period tracking app. So that I can use anonymously, depending, of course, on the apps that that people are aware of. You can sign up, use a free version for a certain amount of time, and then paid versions or subscription-based models will then allow you additional features. So in most cases, because you and I know how these apps or services, whatever we call it, products are set up, is that we want to make them valuable and useful for the people that we're designing for. So in this case, make it valuable and useful for women. We know ways of setting up tracking based on how women's bodies work and how we know research shows the commonalities between that. So even when it's not tracking yet your real body data, or it's maybe wearable or temperature that we might add in, or whatever the case might be. We're deciding as that user, that woman, female, what to add. And that may be from a qualitative point of view. We add that, like how we're feeling,
Mhm.
etc. So I guess where I'm going with this is that what you were pointing out, or what I was thinking about as you were talking, is that um, we're creating systems, or there are systems that are created for us, depending if we're a designer or not, that allow our users, humans, females in this case, enter information, or for that system to track her. And
Yeah.
that's real data, whether it's things that we're as a user entering
Yeah.
or it's tracking. So in the case of what you described for that scenario where the women, the mother and daughter were talking,
Yes.
that one, those kind of scenarios to me start to feel very uncomfortable because of the different ways we can interact with technology or input. It can capture our voice or our language. Is that as a conversation was not something that the woman were, well, in the case of the app, anyways, I'm getting into very specifics here. It's like the app, I can enter information, it can track me, the system can remind me, and then I can respond through notifications and so on. So that's all information that's very useful to me if
Yes.
I'm getting that back to then understand what's my summary and where am I today versus over time. Whereas a conversation that then the system's hearing or capturing, even if it is anonymized, that as a something that it's capturing through an AI or whatever it is to understand this as a particular moment in time is one that
Mhm.
someone else or a system needs to pay attention to feels uncomfortable for obvious reasons. And how do we, as design, maybe I'll just pause there for your reflection on, what that means as to how a system can be designed, where we as
Mhm.
designers can be aware of that as a impact or potential out, I shouldn't say potential, as an outcome that we've created, like
Mhm.
that's creating that system. My assumption, the person that designed that app designed it in a way that I want to be create something that's useful and valuable for women. I want them to be able to track
Yeah.
their data, input qualitative feedback so that the system can truly understand them, not just approximate their mood and
Yeah.
their state. And from there, these other things that then the technology can access without even the designers. If I just kind of collectively say that's the people that are creating this, I would say the intention, if I go with I always go with the positive mindset that an app is created in a way that it is looking to provide value for that user. Outcome might be different. So how do we create a tool with that scenario that will have the outcomes
Mhm.
that we want?
I really think it goes back to re-implementing the foundations of true human factors design, right? I feel right now there's a huge alienation of the design practice to the people for whom systems were built to begin with.
Mm.
And there is a lot of mechanical practice as well, too. I think a lot of and this is not to slight anyone, but I think there's a whole new generation of design practice that is mechanical. You go to a couple of boot camps from some other field and you come and you just apply it mechanically without understanding that there is contextual impact. There's sometimes negative outcomes for people based on that. We
Mhm.
also need to revisit real life use cases, impact stories to understand, what is happening when we design X this way, right? Versus that way. And I think we've lost a lot of that archaeological thread to human empathy in the design practice. So that's definitely one way. We also need to also think that as designers, we have a lot of power, but at the same time, we don't. And for me, one of the things I've been thinking about for the last 5 years is how do we enable literacy? Because literacy is what is going to enable engagement, right? Engagement can encourage activism that can inform policy because
Mhm.
nothing moves without policy. And sadly, we're at a posture in civilization where there are certain portions of the population looking at a human frame and saying, how much more can we reify this, right? So much of our life has been reified. Love is now, okay, Cupid, right?
Mhm.
about it. Like everything we think about, somebody's making money doing it or has casted it as something of value, and we're paying for that. So I think it's really a deeper conversation than even maybe just the book, is that we need to rewind the clock back to a point where we demonstrate empathy. And there's also, if you look at the case of Timnit Gebru, who was let go from Google, those of us who put our hands up to say, hey, we need to pause, let's take a stop and see what we're doing that could be detrimental to human beings. You get shoved in the corner, right? And so it's a very tight rope to toe, I think, when you are in design. And like myself, you ask me, like, what am I calling myself? These days, I'm a design activist is what I am, right? And so I think we need to, because our field became plateaued, I think, about 2009, and now it's basically just gone off the rails in terms of silencing the designer. And when I say design, I mean
So I love this, hearing it as a prompt. It's like this idea, like rewind the clock and have empathy. So this idea of, pausing before you build something. So
yes,
if we think of like, before launching into innovation, we stop and we ask like, what's already happened here and who's been affected, or who's
yeah,
already been affected by what we're creating. So
yeah,
the like you talk about how like systems that shape women's lives, especially in health and AI, so that these have been long built without them, or worst built on their exclusion. And I
yes,
say, I mean, again, I'll go with the optimistic or positive mindset that people didn't do that on purpose. If we
yeah,
think of that as the goodness that people have when they are creating products or ideas, is that they want them to be useful. And if we want,
yes,
educating people on what, inclusivity means specific for women, that we would then, get past the kind of ignored systems or data voids or medical defaults that have been based on male bodies. Again, we know now that we have this knowledge, we can move forward and understand that when we're creating a given, fill in the blanks, that those people that we're designing for need to be included. So reclaiming the narrative rather than just designing for women today, we can ask, what systems or assumptions need to be redesigned from the ground up from your point of view.
I love that, right? Like what assumptions need to be made. I think you also remember back in the day when we were designing, there was always a footnote of the many assumptions of the design. I don't know if you remember that, but we would say, okay, we're designing this system. And that was the time when we as designers, design researchers, we had lab books, right? We had dated, auditable lab books that gave the history of the thing that we were designing, be it always for R&D, but we had lab books. And I think that conversation, that narrative has just been truncated when capitalistic machinery took over, right? And so I think these are all the things we need to rewind the clock on. Not everything that we need to rewind the clock on moving fast and breaking things, right? And so it's at this point where we need to like move slowly and rebuild things. And it's just all of it. It's not necessarily just in design, but it's just really across the board. And it's very overwhelming. But yes, I think we need to have some deep conversations, critical conversations about design practice. Why are we doing this? What's our reason for existence in these spaces? If you just want service designers to, play around in mural, that's all fine and dandy, but do not call them design researchers. You're not actually doing the work of a design researcher, right? That ethnography, that deep contextual understanding, the empathy and all of that. You also recall back in the day, we were not in the office, we were on the road. We're in people's houses looking, how do you sort your pictures, right? We were in labs doing things. Generation of designers that I meet right now, they don't know what usability tests in labs are or ethnographic studies, right? They just know, well, they send us an Excel spreadsheet with these pieces of data and the insights say this, let's mock up a screen in mural, and this is not design. So I think I want to speak directly to business people as well, too. Those CEOs on that level who have control over these things. This is a fundamental risk in your business model. when you
Mm-hmm.
design with your eyes closed. And so one of the things I said on the previous podcast a couple of weeks ago was that for CEOs thinking that the fast road is the best road, well, we have actually disconnected from the humanity of the things that we do, the service that we're providing. This approach to designing with a lack of context, with a lack of empathy, with a lack of basic assumptions of what is a risk factor. And investors should take note. There is a new generation of folks coming who will not have tolerance for these things. And so now is the time to rewind the clock in terms of making sure that we infuse deep human empathies in these systems that are meant to serve us, right?
Mm. Yeah, it really feels that it's this idea of I mean, you've mentioned empathy a few times. It's empathy to me feels how where it's not as sentiment, can't say the word, and to me not as sentiment, or sorry, let me say this again so that we'll record it properly. Empathy not as sentiment but as accountability. Empathy, it's like
Clock that, clock that. I love that. Let me write that down.
yeah, so empathy here, it's not just a emotional, it's a practice of listening deeply, of redistributing power and
Yeah.
co-creating with those stories that have been, really co-creating with those whose story have been sidelined, if that's the right language to use. Really thinking about this very differently from how important it is to pause and what that means and how is that a something that people even realize that they need to do or who can help them pause because as you pointed out CEOs or technologists and those creating companies or in current companies where it's like we want to build and create faster and
Yes.
that's great if our intention is to create things that are better and informed by those that we're creating for while
Yes.
at the same time then measuring what we're creating with specific metrics that allow us to
Mhm.
know what is good enough. What do we so from this is a so I feel like I'm asking you three questions every time I say something. So when we pause, ideal state would be, take a moment to pause and think about what can we learn from the type of, product service experience that you're creating. What can we learn from the past so that when you're designing going forward you can do that with care?
Mhm.
So for your I guess from your point of view, thinking of we'll use the woman's example,
Yes.
let's say the period tracker, because that was one that
Mhm.
is now still
Mhm.
in my mind. I know you've got other examples you wanted to share, but with that one in mind, so, women, I'll let you phrase this however you feel where you want to take that, but a system product created for women, if we pause before we build it, and what do we learn when we look backwards with care in order to then
Mhm.
move forward?
Insight always leads to the best foresight. And you said something that just triggered another thought for me. As a designer, we are very famous for having all these wonderful frameworks, the design thinking framework. And within that space, one of the recurring, long-standing one, at least theoretically, was the whole idea of iteration. We do iterative design.
Hmm.
When was the last time you heard anybody talk about iterative design? No, I don't. I mean, theoretically, it does exist. And I think, when we talk about taking pauses and thinking about how we move forward, I'm not saying the kind of research we did 22 years, 25 years ago is necessarily still applicable today. But I definitely see some degree of research that needs to be conducted. Think about the space you're in. So, for example, you're in the space of making designs for women, whether it's period app or just gear or whatever it is. I think it behooves every designer to stop as a collective and think about what new forms of research that we can adopt and adapt to help inform future design. And maybe it is lit review, right? It is doing reviews of stories where there've been negative outcomes for that this particular software we're designing has impacted people's life. That is a kind of research. So once we've done this, we're then able to take these contextually situated stories and say, how might we mitigate that in subsequent releases? So when I say research, it's not necessarily those sitting in a lab, but also just keeping your ear to the ground to understand the space that you're practicing in and what is the impact that you're having as a designer. What is the impact to the end user of the software that you're designing? And I think a lot of that empathy and that heart has gone out of the design process. Not necessarily something to blame designers for, but definitely you need to do your homework. If you're in a space, know the impact of the space that you're in. But I think as well too, we used to have $250,000 budgets for doing these type of studies back in the day. That money no longer exists, and it has been deprioritized. There are lots of people sitting in C-suites who have no idea what happens at that level of engagement with people that informs the software that they're doing quarterly statements about. So I think, again, I am, calling out to those CEOs, shareholders, and all of these folks who are just, counting the money in these rooms without understanding the longer term impact. I also want to just briefly say before I shut up here that we also need to think about policymakers who have probably been in their wonderful, government job forever, who have not really kept up with educating themselves on the disruptive technology that is informing the way we exist in society, right? Again, this book is for people like that to understand there was a story and now and this is where we are and this is where we're going. So how do we pause and take that all into consideration in terms of new ways of design, critical design? I know the term critical design is one that really perhaps best frame this conversation that we're having critical thoughts about how we make decisions in design systems that affect people.
So
Yeah.
there is so much more to deep dive into with this conversation, and I just want to be conscious of your time.
Oh,
But
we need
a
to hold a masterclass, Ren.
yeah,
Yeah, we
there's
should,
so
and
much.
we have so much to say.
I could talk. I think it's like there's only so many hours in the day, but I could use 5 more to go on to so many of these topics to highlight the work that you've done specific to this conversation. I'm going to go to the book itself. So can you give us again the name of the book and tell us about where we will hear about this and see this for the first time?
Yes. So the book, I happen to have a complimentary copy thanks to my publisher. It's right here. Okay. It's called Design Heuristics for Emerging Technologies. And I kept the emerging broad because we have no idea what the new posture is, how they're going to rebrand this stuff. And subtitle AI Data and Human Centered Futures. I had to keep the human centered in there. You could buy this anywhere books are sold. Anywhere. So yeah. So check it out. It's actually available worldwide from my understanding from the publisher, which is
Amazing.
yes, Universal Right Publication.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks for that. And what have you liked best about being able to share your knowledge, your insights
Yeah.
in this format? That's a physical book.
Um,
Is it available digitally as well?
I need to. You have a copy coming your way at some point when I see you. But
Mhm.
nonetheless, what have I learned? I have learned honestly through the process of going through a doctoral where I'm laser focus on something like that, deep humility. I think as a practitioner in design space, when I went back to do studies, as a Gen X, I thought I knew everything. And it was very humbling to understand that how society is animated. And I use that word broadly to say, whether it is how we design systems, how we speak, the clothes we wear, that is the animation of what lies on the underbelly that informs so much of what we do.
Mhm.
And I went in just as somebody who was like a computational rhetoric, lover who wanted to design systems and blah, blah, blah. And I came out wondering, like, does everyone going into fields of study come out being a post-human, post-colonial, feminist, and all of the other labels that we often think about when we think about people pursuing scholarship, right? And
Mhm.
so I came back, I think, with a deep humility and sensitivity to people that I had never once taken in their stories and realized that the impact of the thing that I was doing was negative to their lives. And so that is the big takeaway I think I got from going through the process of writing the book, because it also enabled me to mesh together my own mechanical practice of design
Mhm.
with critical thought, right?
Mm.
So I'm no longer doing anything. And it's I'll be honest, sometimes it could be a sad and lonely place because you sound like you're gaslighting yourself because everybody else is just doing the boot camps and doing the 10 out of 10 heuristics. And I'm like, oh my God, this is like really horrible. Humility is the word. I'd like to end with humility is what I've learned through the
Amazing.
process.
Yeah, thank you. Well, you're a humble person with much knowledge and wisdom to share. Do you have time for 5 quick fire questions?
For you, I have as many questions. Yes.
Okay. So I've got actually I've got 7. And this
Yes.
will become a compilation of shorts.
Let's do
Okay.
it.
I'm gonna add these are ad lib. So consent is I'm gonna ask you to fill in the blanks in this one, or fill in the blank, you tell me. Consent is not a checkbox, it's a
Absolute requirement.
number 2, or I'll just say next.
Yes.
Okay, next one. The most dangerous myth about AI.
It's passive.
Perfect.
It's passive.
Design flaw you see everywhere that drives you nuts.
Oh, dark patterns. Things that opt me into stuff, assuming that I want to be opt in. No, let me opt in.
Yeah, so much to unpack there.
Yes.
So, reflecting on your incredible heuristics, which heuristic you repeat more off, or sorry, let me reframe that. Which or one heuristic you repeat most often in your own head?
Consent. Consent. Consent is everything. It's respect.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks for sharing. If you could put one design principle on a billboard, what would it say?
It's funny you should say that. I think privacy, it triggers something for people. It gives them the sense that you're being watched. So heuristics around privacy by design would be the big one for me.
And this is a follow-up question. And do you feel, or actually shouldn't say it that way, does it change if that's on a billboard in a physical space or in a digital?
I think no, it doesn't matter because I think the reason I say that as well too, we're talking about surveillance, and surveillance right now is like this right now. I feel surveilled right now, or whether or not you leave your house. So for me, billboard, otherwise, it's definitely something I think, yes, privacy by design, but it's my cityscape, my landscape, my innerscape, my house. Yes.
What's one design object that you own that brings you joy each time you use it?
Are you gonna laugh? My squishy ball. Not there, but now I was just like, I need my squishy ball. But it was, you used to get them as swag wherever. Everybody got one of these like tension balls because we needed it back then.
Yes, that's funny. Like thinking of
Yeah,
ones where it's like the color, the size, the shape, the sound.
yeah.
It's like it does bring joy just as the memory.
But
Yes, yeah, exactly. What's a phrase you wish tech people would stop saying?
well, an app for that. I freaking hate when people gravitate to solutions and they're like, oh yeah, they're going to create an app for that. Not everything needs to be an app. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, so following that one,
Yes.
the future of tech should feel more like.
Backdrop. That a good one? Backdrop.
I like that. I'm curious when I think of what it means, if it's in parallel to what you're thinking, but I think that's why I like it because it's open-ended.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
last question.
Yes.
Last question. What gives you hope right now?
The next generation. Yes, the next generation. I think we've had a massive societal shift, and hopefully the backlash of that will be, I don't want to say revenge, but the correction by the next generation. Yes. Yes.
And what about the next generation gives you hope?
They have a lot of awareness. I have teenage boys, and sometimes I hear them speak and I think, wow, that's really, really cool. You know, there is something, I think there's a level of meanness that has been weeded out of that generation. I think about the whole bullying thing, for example, in school. And the way I hear my kids speak, I think it's almost as if bullying, I'm not saying it doesn't exist, right? They're nicer.
Wonderful. Thanks
Yeah.
for sharing that
So,
reflection and knowledge. And I would know, knowing you, that essence of what your boys are, that comes through them has come from you. So thanks for
Yeah,
sharing that with them. It's been wonderful to have this time with you.
likewise.
I find that each and every time I talk with you, I learn something new, and in the format of a podcast interview such as this, that I learn even more things. So go figure. Sometimes we need a different format to learn more. Thanks so much
Yeah.
for your time today.
Thank you, and I hope we can continue this offline.
Thanks for watching. If you found this episode valuable, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss future conversations. Design with Renn is all about creating thoughtful, inclusive, and human-centered systems. And I'm just getting started. Got questions or ideas? Please drop a comment below or reach out on social. See you next time.